Hello, and welcome back to the Catholic Fertility Podcast. I'm your host, Lucia Harmeling, and I am so happy to be with you today. If you are in Houston, today is the most humid day of the year. I swear. We walked outside today, and I was like, we are literally in a swamp. All that to say, it's such a good day to be inside recording a podcast episode because it's nice and AC'd and cool in here. The topic we're going to talk about today is a topic that is so overlooked for fertility and hormones, health, metabolism, mood, energy, literally all the things. It's one of my favorite things to talk about with clients because it's something that they never expect is going to be something that they can look into to optimize their fertility and hormones and all of the other things. But it is. And that's why we always cover this and talk about it with clients within the first month of working together because it's huge. Now, what is it? Blood sugar. Blood sugar is such a, in a way, simple topic, in a way, not so simple topic, but we're going to simplify it today because your blood sugar, the way that your body regulates blood sugar and your lifestyle choices, your food choices, your stress, all of those things impact your blood sugar levels throughout the day, throughout the night. And that plays a huge role in how your body does everything. I know in the past episodes, we've talked about how I view fertility as a state of your body. When your body feels safe and regulated and nourished and in a really good place and in a safe place, fertility is optimized. You're in this fertile state. And when there's a lot of inflammation, when there's a lot of stress, when there's a lot of different body things going on where your body deems, hey, like now's not the best time to bring a baby into the world, then we shift from being a fertility preferred state to a not fertility preferred state. So there's a term out there, unexplained infertility. And I hate that term. I try to not even use it as much, which is kind of funny because it's in the free guide that I have for y'all. But I try not to use it because I hate the term unexplained. I'm someone who loves data and loves answers. So if there's something not going right, or if there's something going on, and if you've listened to the first few episodes and heard about my story, I'm someone who understands just the ins and outs of how the body works. And I know that if something's off, there's a reason for it. So there's a reason for all of the things that are happening. And that's not to say that we're always going to figure out everything about our life because that's not realistic. We're human. And there are some things that even in our faith that are just not, that we're not able to fully, completely grasp. And that's okay. But most of the time, what I have seen with unexplained infertility is we're using that term unexplained when the right questions haven't been asked yet, the right data hasn't been evaluated yet. And so it's unexplained almost as like sorry, no idea why you're not getting pregnant. It's like, wait a second. Okay, there's so many other things we can look into. Are we sure it's unexplained? Or has it just not been investigated yet? And that's another whole purpose of this podcast is to give you information and more clarity around what are the other things that impact fertility that maybe your doctor's not talking to you about, that your fertility clinic is definitely not talking to you about. Right now, I'm on this big pause from social media, like really taking a huge step back because I just noticed a huge connection between my social media use and my mental health. And I'm sure most of you do too. And we'll have another episode on that and how that can impact fertility and hormones. All that to say, I recently saw this reel on Instagram and it was talking about how IVF clinics don't really care about the reason why you're not getting pregnant or the reason why your hormones are the way that they are because their only solution is IVF. Right. So if you and your partner happen to go into a fertility clinic and your partner has low sperm count, they're like, that's okay. We have IVF. Or if your progesterone is low and you're not conceiving, you're not able to maintain a healthy pregnancy, their solution, IVF. If there's inflammation in the body, okay, that's fine. IVF. So their only solution is IVF. The why to them doesn't matter because the solution is always the same. The solution is always IVF, whether it's your partner has low sperm count or there's inflammation in your body or your thyroid is low or whatever the thing may be. They're like, okay, that's fine. We have IVF, right? But for us as Catholics who don't want to go down that route, there has to be another way. And that's another reason that really brought me to do this podcast, is because there is another way, and there's understanding. God created our body, the woman's body, the male's body, to work a certain way and to also give us signals when something's out of balance or out of whack. And our job is not to just dismiss all of that and then be like, oh, it's okay, I'm just going to go play God over here. No, the whole point is that our body is talking to us. And if we can listen and respond appropriately, then we can actually support the body that God gave us to work the way that it was designed to work. Okay, all that being said, this is why I do a podcast, because I could just talk forever, but diving into blood sugar and why this is so key. Now, if you're hearing this, you're like, I don't have blood sugar issues. I don't have diabetes. I don't have PCOS. My blood sugars are fine. I'm going to tell you this. Most of the clients that I work with, we have to work on blood sugar. Why? If you listen back, I think it was episode 3, when we talk about how the majority of women are chronically undereating, chronically undernourished, chronically nutrient depleted. So you might even be eating a good amount of calories, but the nutrients aren't there. Well, blood sugar is not just about eating enough. It's about eating in a way that supports our body in using those nutrients properly and in optimizing blood sugar levels. So it's about, yes, the quantity of nutrients going into our body, but it's also about the timing of meals. It's also about the stress our body perceives when we're eating, after eating, even throughout the day. There's so many different factors that impact our blood sugar levels. And that's something we're going to talk about today. Okay, think about blood sugar as one signal that your body gives itself that it's in this safe, fertile state. Steady blood sugar levels provide steady energy, provide steady nourishment for our cells. Our body wants to feel stable and nourished, period. When there are blood sugar roller coasters, so really low blood sugars, really high blood sugars, kind of just all over the place. Think of it as like this big roller coaster, up and down all day. What that then translates to is there's instability in the body. It's not balanced throughout the day. What that does is it sends signals to our brain saying, hey, there's some stressors going on in our body right now. There's a little bit of instability. So we may want to hold off on ovulating right now. I don't know if this is a safe space to ovulate, to bring a baby into this body, because there's a lot of instability. There's a lot of stress. Our body's really smart. God designed our body really, really well. And so there are mechanisms in the body that when blood sugar levels are low, things will happen. And when blood sugar levels are high, things will also happen, because our body is constantly trying to keep us in this equilibrium. The thing about it is that if our body is always working overtime to keep us in this really steady, balanced state, that's a lot of energy and stress that our body has to go through just to maintain like basic things to keep us alive. Let's talk a little bit about that. There's a big connection between blood sugar levels and cortisol. I'm going to assume that most of you here have heard about cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone that's made by our adrenal glands. And cortisol is not necessarily bad. I think sometimes people hear cortisol and they're like, oh my gosh, like, cortisol. Cortisol plays a role in our body. And what cortisol does is it helps our body respond to stress. Now, naturally, we have our own cortisol curve. You can think of it that way. So cortisol has a natural daily pattern in our body. Cortisol helps our body handle stressors throughout the day. We also need cortisol to be able to function. in a way, right? So cortisol is one of those things that gets us going in the morning. There's something called the cortisol awakening response. So our cortisol levels naturally should peak within 60 minutes of waking up, which is a reason why it's really good to hold off on having caffeine within that first hour to two of waking up, because you allow for your body's natural cortisol production to kick in and do what it needs to do. So in an ideal world, our cortisol is not that high in the morning, and then within an hour it has a slow rise, and then from that it hits its peak, and then it slowly starts to decline throughout the day, so that when it is time for bed in the evening, our cortisol is low and our melatonin production is higher, giving us that wind down feeling that, okay, it's time to go to bed. Now, when there are blood sugar issues, that signals to our body that there is stress. And when there are blood sugar imbalances, that can cause cortisol levels to get a little dysregulated, a little wonky. I'm going to give you an example of that. So let's say that you have really low blood sugar from maybe not eating enough, from maybe going too long between meals, from not eating balanced meals, from eating just carbohydrates all day, whatever the thing may be. Let's say that there's a low blood sugar level. This is where cortisol comes in. So cortisol is going to kick in. It's going to ramp up, because cortisol can break down protein, can break down fat, can break down glycogen stores, which is basically a fancy way of saying your blood sugar stores, which are kept in your liver. When blood sugar is low, your body knows, okay, well, we actually need blood sugar at a pretty stable place to be able to live, right? Like if you bottom out with your blood sugar and your body didn't have the mechanism to regulate blood sugars back up, we would die, right? Like that's a real thing. So our body is really smart. Blood sugar gets low. Cortisol kicks up, it breaks down what it needs to release glucose, which is sugar, to then increase our blood sugar levels back up. Now, the issue with that, especially when it comes to ovulation, when it comes to hormone production, chronic cortisol elevation, so cortisol being chronically elevated because you're constantly having low blood sugars, also increases insulin. So insulin, think of insulin as the bouncer at a bar. So insulin is the bouncer which opens the door for blood sugar to get into the cells. Okay. We want insulin to kick in because we need that blood glucose to get into the cells so that it can do its job. Cortisol rises, blood sugar goes back up. What also happens when blood sugar goes back up is our body releases insulin. Insulin is what gets glucose or sugar into our cells. Glucose is what feeds our cells. Okay, so we want glucose to be able to get into the cell. Now, what happens is if we have chronically high cortisol levels, so cortisol is always high, trying to bring that blood sugar back up because blood sugar was always low. And then insulin gets constantly released over and over and over again. And what that causes is elevated insulin levels. When that happens over and over and over again, and we get this overproduction of insulin, then our cells start to become not as responsive to that insulin. Every time you eat, your body naturally releases insulin. Insulin gets sugar, glucose into your cells. So you need that sugar in your cells to be able to function, to be able to do all the things that you do. We don't want it just hanging out in our bloodstream. That's why if you have diabetes and you're not taking insulin and you're eating, you're not able to get that glucose out of the bloodstream into the cells. And that's why glucose levels are higher. All that to say, if we have that chronic cortisol rises, to get blood sugar back up, insulin keeps getting kind of spit out, right? More insulin, more insulin, more insulin. Eventually, our body stops responding as much to insulin. I see this a lot when we draw labs for clients. I always check hemoglobin A1C, which looks at your 3-month average of what your blood sugars are doing, fasting glucose levels, fasting insulin. That tells me, has this person chronically been under eating? Are they having a lot of blood sugar imbalances, which is now impacting how their insulin is working in their body? When we have elevated, so higher insulin levels, that can increase your androgens. So one of your androgens is testosterone. So when we have really high androgens, high testosterone, progesterone levels, things like that, it can actually disrupt ovulation. It can delay ovulation. It can completely prevent ovulation. So that's one way that it can impact our cycle, especially if there's PCOS. PCOS is closely connected with blood sugar dysregulation, can be, especially if there's high androgens. Now, another thing too is when there are blood sugar roller coasters going on throughout the day, blood sugar is low, cortisol has to be kicked up. Think about it like this. Elevated cortisol levels prevent you from producing enough progesterone. Think of like there's raw materials that either progesterone is going to come in and build from or cortisol is going to use to build from. Well, if your blood sugar is low and your body wants you to stay alive, it's going to rev up cortisol. So it takes those raw materials to be able to produce cortisol to then bring blood sugar back up. However, if that's constantly happening, then there's only so many raw materials, and then your body cannot go in to produce progesterone. Progesterone is what gets produced when you ovulate. We know that if there's a lot of stress in the body, if cortisol levels are chronically elevated, if blood sugar is chronically dysregulated all over the place, then we don't end up producing good amounts of progesterone. Low progesterone levels are something that I do see extremely often, especially when there are short luteal phases. So if your luteal phase, which if you're not sure what a luteal phase is, your luteal phase is right after ovulation until the day before your bleed. You want that to be at least 11 days long to really support that good progesterone production. Now, progesterone think of it as the pregnancy hormone. So your body, if you have a really strong ovulation, your body produces a really healthy amount of progesterone. You need a healthy amount of progesterone in order to sustain a healthy pregnancy, which is, oh my gosh, I could go on this soapbox, but I really wish that every single provider out there would check HCG levels along with progesterone as soon as a woman finds out she's pregnant. And we'll do a whole episode on that because that was part of my story too, is knowing that I had a history of low progesterone, making sure that my progesterone was checked immediately when I found out I was pregnant with both pregnancies, because it being low, you can do something about that when you find out so that you can hopefully sustain that pregnancy. And we'll talk about progesterone levels on another episode, but all that to say, healthy blood sugar levels support your body knowing that it is in a safe, fertile state. Progesterone is key for getting pregnant and sustaining a healthy pregnancy. We're going to talk about some signs that your blood sugar might be preventing or affecting your ovulation and your hormones. The reason I say ovulation is because ovulation is the key event in a cycle. I think a lot of times women are given this idea of like, oh, you should track your bleed. Like, how many days are you bleeding and how long are your cycles? No, ovulation, knowing when you're ovulating is so key, and understanding ovulation, even also your luteal phase, which we'll also do an episode on that, is so important, because being able to track signs of ovulation, cervical mucus, understanding how many days of a luteal phase is a really strong luteal phase, understanding what symptoms to look for to know if you have low progesterone. We're going to get into that. But today, what I want you to know is that there are common signs that blood sugar might be one of those things that you should look into. Okay, so if you are having energy crashes, especially in the early afternoon, that's a really common one where our body might have been running on stress hormones throughout the morning, and then we kind of crash early afternoon. And that usually is a blood sugar dip. That might lead you to feel a little bit more anxious, really low energy, unmotivated, sluggish, brain foggy, you name it. A lot of times when I see clients, they're like, that's when I start thinking about getting a cookie, eating some chocolate cake, going for a bag of chips, because your body knows, again, that carbohydrates are a really fast way to get energy into your body. So it's going to start craving those simple sugars or more carb-rich foods. Again, that's not that there's anything wrong with your body. Your body knows what it needs and it's trying to give you what it needs. Another one is waking up between 2 and 4 a.m. That is usually a blood sugar dip or even a cortisol spike. It can happen between those hours at night. If you are always waking up between 2 and 4 a.m., you might even feel a little bit hungry. You're having trouble falling back asleep. It could be a blood sugar issue. irritability or anxiety between meals. When I was under eating for a big portion of my 20s and even teens, one of my biggest symptoms was anxiety and feeling just on edge and irritable all the time. And that was purely my body just communicating like, hey, our blood sugar's low. You need to get fuel. And so any other thing that I had to focus on felt stressful, felt annoying because all my body wanted was more fuel. Strong sugar carb cravings, we talked about that one. Again, because your body knows that those are things that are going to give you quick energy, so it's going to crave those. Another big one that I see in practice is women relying on caffeine and feeling like they need more and more coffee throughout the day. Whew, especially if you're in the early mid-afternoon and you're like, I could really use another cup of caffeine. Have you tried a snack first? Like, have you tried a good nourished snack first? Because do you actually need more caffeine, or is your body just asking you for energy from food? Are you also dehydrated? That's another big one. And we'll have a whole, I'm sure, several episodes on minerals and how minerals impact, one, blood sugar regulation, but then also energy production, how our body produces energy. Another big one that's really relevant to what we're talking about is irregular cycles, having delayed ovulation, and then low progesterone. So really big ones here. I'll just mention these two as signs that you may have low progesterone. If you're spotting around ovulation, if you are spotting before you actually start bleeding, if you have really, really bad PMS, those are all signs that your progesterone might be on the lower end. That's where you can start to think about, okay, is blood sugar maybe one of those factors for me? One of the things that I recently did, and this is where the inspiration to this episode really came from, one, because I see it with like every single client, but the second thing is I recently wore a blood glucose monitor for 2 weeks. And I have done this before. I did this, I want to say it was during my first postpartum, during that time where I was really starting to get into functional testing and wanted a deeper picture of what was happening with my blood sugar because I knew that my anxiety was tied to something around that. Sure enough, it was. And so I wanted to do another check and see where I was at. I will tell you, having stable blood sugar levels has been such a game changer for me because my energy has never been better. My mood has never been more stable. I'm not saying I don't get crankier every once in a while. My husband will tell you. But overall, I know that when I am nourished and when I'm eating balanced meals and when I am supporting myself in a way that helps me keep my stress low, regardless of what's happening in life, my blood sugar levels are better. And so everything else is better. And I will tell you, blood sugar regulation and keeping blood sugar level in check is huge, not just for you, but it's really big for your husband. It's really important for your kids. This is why if a kid has a really nourished, balanced breakfast versus, and I'll just give the example of like a banana by itself or a piece of toast by itself, more than likely their energy and their mood is going to be a lot more stable because their blood sugar is more stable. So it's not just for us females, it's for every single person. And I will tell you, I also have clients now who are premenopausal and some that have gone into menopause. And I will say, especially us women, we become less and less sensitive to insulin. What that means is that really honing in on how to balance blood sugars and eating balanced meals is going to be so key to keeping our hormones in check, not just during our really fertile years, our childbearing years, but also just keeping our hormones steady and supporting our body in a way that's going to make us feel good through every single life transition. I'm going to give you a few simple ways that you can start supporting your blood sugar. Number one, and if you haven't listened to episode 3 on eating enough, please go and do that. That one's huge. On there, one of the tips that I gave was eating a good, nourishing breakfast. Now, I know that there's some of you that you're like, there's no way that I can eat a big breakfast because I'm not hungry in the morning. Okay, great. I would say if that's you, then what you can start doing is having a pre-breakfast snack. Ideally eating something within an hour of waking up and something that is balanced. When I say balanced, I mean no naked carbs. Okay. So naked carbs are basically carbs by themselves. So a banana would be a naked carb. It's carbohydrates. Now, if you did a banana with some nut butter, or if you did a banana in a hard-boiled egg or a banana in a Greek yogurt, that would be more balanced because a balanced meal should have carbohydrates, proteins, fats, and fiber in them. In a snack, it's sometimes hard to fit all of those in there, but if you can get at least carbs and protein or carbs and fat, that is going to drastically help how well your body tolerates those carbohydrates and what it's able to do with them. So one would be having breakfast within or a pre-breakfast snack within the first hour of waking up. That is the goal. Next would be to include protein, carbs, and fat at every single meal. Now, fiber is in there too. Fiber is a type of carbohydrate. Okay. When we eat high fiber meals, fiber slows down how quickly our body breaks down and absorbs food. So that also helps with regulating blood sugar levels, because think of it as like a slower increase in blood sugar versus eating something without any fiber and then we absorb it really quickly and then our blood sugar goes up. So fat and fiber and protein are super helpful in just slowing down that blood sugar rise. They also help us stay fuller longer. So that's why if you have a banana by itself, maybe an hour or two later, you're starving. If you have a banana with some yogurt or some eggs or a banana and peanut butter, that will hold you over longer. It's because of that blood sugar stability. The other big one is stop relying on coffee as fuel. I'm not saying you have to give up coffee, okay? I'm not saying you have to give up coffee. But as someone, and I am someone who has completely cut out, for the most part, caffeine out of her diet. I'm not saying you need to do that, but for me, it was super beneficial. I am saying though, if you are someone who loves their caffeinated cup of coffee in the morning, can you delay it a little bit? Okay, so when you wake up, the first thing you need is not to down caffeine. Again, your cortisol will naturally reach its peak within 60 minutes of you waking up. So allow your body to produce that energy naturally after you have your breakfast snack or you've had a full-on breakfast, then you can add in some caffeine. And I promise you that will make such a big difference for you, because caffeine doesn't actually produce more energy in the body. It almost like tricks your body to feel like it has more energy. That's why a lot of times when you drink caffeine, you can feel more focused, more energized, but then you do have that crash. It's because your body actually needed true energy versus this like artificial energy, is what I'll call it. Okay, another big one, which again, episode 3, all about eating enough, prioritizing getting enough calories in. That is huge for blood sugar balance. A lot of times women come to me and they're like, oh, okay, but if I want to keep my blood sugars stable, then I should completely cut out carbohydrates. Absolutely not. Part of having stable blood sugar levels is including carbs at every single meal. It's just more about the balance and figuring out what is the right balance that works well for your body, for your lifestyle, for your stress, for your level of physical activity. That's why I can't come on here and be like, these are the exact amount of carbs you need at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. This is the amount of protein. This is the amount of fat. Like everyone is very different. We were made very differently and our life is very different and our needs are very different. That's why even just at a basic level, if I could give you one tip, it would be include some source of protein at every meal. I know right now everything is proteinified, if that's even a word. There's protein in water now, which sounds really disgusting. Really aim for more whole food forms of protein, but include protein, include fiber, include fat. When you have all three, your body just does a lot better. If you're someone who's like, I have no idea how to do any of that, that is something that we talk about way more in depth and individualized inside of our one-on-one. I will say, if you're someone who is really good at looking at data on your own and you have not worn a glucose monitor before, I recently ordered mine through Stello. I want to say it was $59 for 2 weeks. And basically they send you a little monitor. You can pop it on. I'll put the link in the show notes, but you can pop it on and then it's an app and you can see what your blood sugar is doing after meals. I think it's fascinating. And again, when I did it the first time, I saw how I was having a lot of lows, especially when I was waiting too long between meals or on days where I was extremely stressed. Because again, stress also raises cortisol, which can raise blood sugar, but then increases insulin. And so then you get that big dip. So that's why it's not uncommon to crave sweeter things when we're really stressed. I know so many little nuggets to throw in there, but Anyway, I think a blood glucose monitor is great. We do that with all of our one-on-one clients. I'm not saying you have to do that, but if you're someone who does really well with making changes based on data, that might be really helpful for you. It might also be really eye-opening because, even for my husband, and the whole reason I actually recommended he do one too is he was having some energy dips in the middle of the afternoon, especially after certain meals or if he was going too long between meals. And I was like, I bet you it's a blood sugar issue. And so sure enough, we saw that especially on days where he was really stressed, his blood sugar was dipping pretty quickly in the afternoon. And so we just made a few tweaks and he's feeling a lot better. So hopefully he doesn't care that I shared that, but that's marriage. It's who he's married to. It's fine. Okay, we talked about a lot of things. We talked about why low blood sugar can cause a lot of dysregulation in the body. We talked about how it actually impacts ovulation and hormone production. We talked about ways that you can balance your blood sugars. We talked about a glucose monitor. We talked about, so many things, all the things. If you have any specific questions you want answered about blood sugar, obviously you can't send me your whole medical history and be like, hey, can you analyze this for me? No, I can't. I'm a dietitian, but I'm not your dietitian unless you're working with me. However, if you have a question of anything related to blood sugar in general, you can put a comment inside of the Spotify podcast app. I don't know if you can do that on Apple Podcasts. I'm pretty new to podcasting, so I'll have to look at that. I know on YouTube you can comment on there. So feel free to comment in whichever way you're listening to this episode, and I will answer your questions and it'll be super fun. Thank you for being here, and I will see you next time.